Today, lucky enough to have Gerrard Gosens, Order of Australia medalist. Gerrard, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
You were born blind.
Yes, I was born totally blind.
This guy has been up Mt Everest. He's a Paralympic athlete.
Success is a journey, never ever a destination.
What do you think your greatest achievement is thus far?
Probably being on this podcast, I would say.
Apart from that.
Funny enough, it was Dancing with the Stars. If you ask a girl out to go to the movies and they go, well, hang on, you're blind. What are you going to do at the movies? No, they sort of...
Trademark Radio, coming through on your wireless.
Righto. Welcome back to another episode of Trademark Radio. I'm not sure, we don't really have a tagline for Trademark Radio yet, but today we
might get one out of this episode.
We might get one out of this episode. Today we have an amazing guest who, it's just, we're going to find out a lot more about him. This guy has been up Mt Everest. He's a Paralympic athlete. He brought a piece of Everest in with him this morning, but most notably, he's a chocolate guru. So today, lucky enough to have Gerrard Gosens, Order of Australia medalist. Gerrard, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
Mate, it's an absolute pleasure to have you in here. We've just been lucky enough for our entire team to hear a little bit from you and a little bit about your story, which we're going to dive into a lot more. But we met just the other week at a TX charity fundraiser hosted at Chocolate Moments on Albert Street in the city. And mate, that was one of the best affogatos I've ever had in my life.
We make a mean chocolates and a mean cocktail.
Well, yeah, I can tell you my affogato was definitely mean. I could have had about 12 of them, and they were definitely flowing that night. But I restricted myself to one, and I was all the better for it. So, mate, yeah, you're an incredible bloke. I mean, where do we start? You know, so you were born blind.
Yes, I was born totally blind. So there are, I suppose, I have prosthetics, so I haven't had a chance to see, I suppose, light or dark. But for me, obviously, that hasn't hindered me in my pursuits, whether it be at university or high school or my work life or as an athlete. I think for me, it's always about understanding that success is a journey, never ever a destination. And for me, along that journey, has been a whole range of unique challenges in the process. But the journey will go on this year, next year, and onwards it goes.
And I think one of the things that I'm most interested to hear about is some of those unique experiences, because I'm sure they haven't all been perfect, and I'm sure you've, found yourself in a lot of challenging situations. But I also imagine that you've probably grown a lot and, found out a lot about yourself through your different escapades.
Oh, look, and there were times when you thought you were going to be achieving so well, where things just went completely astray. And I think for me, even outside the school grounds, where at times those were the comfortable environments where you knew where things were right in their place, I suppose very similar to a tradesperson knowing where exactly every tool was in the toolkit, or knowing where the job that was at hand, what they were actually going to be doing, where outside the school grounds, those were at times the most challenging, where the unusual experiences were things where you couldn't actually plan for. And we would often go down to the beach at Yeppoon High, and those cold sort of refreshing swims on those hot summer's days. And the tidal flow at Yeppoon is at times quite substantial. At times the water's lapping over the top of the pier, at times struggling to hit the base of the pier. So being well aware of how high the tidal flow was, I would sit on the edge of the pier and very slowly slide in, trying to feel the water with my feet. On this one particular hot summer's day, my mates had just jumped in, and here it was sitting on the edge of the pier. As I very slowly sliding in, my board shorts got stuck on a nail, and for about 1.25 seconds, I know exactly how Superman feels, until the weight of my body was too much for the shorts. The shorts ripped, and I went into the water. Now, there are three significant problems here for a person who's totally blind. A, not knowing who did this most embarrassing thing, and now being totally naked, how to find the towel on the beach, and when walking out of cold water, where to put the hands. So there were some very unique challenges, I suppose, in that one particular moment. But for me, it's always about giving it a go. And living in rural and regional Queensland and places like Yeppoon, there's some very unique challenges, not only just being totally blind, but even working with a guide dog, my first guide dog, Joey. Even for him, working in a high school where you had 600 odd students, well, a guide dog isn't looking at 600 happy little faces that's working with 1,200 little knees. They have to work out who belongs to who and how to get through that long, narrow corridor. And there were simple challenges, okay? When you pick up a school bag, all school bags feel exactly the same. Or is this mine? Is it someone else's? And there are all those smallest things that were often at toughest to get around. And I mean, I think, at times when you think you've done the best job ever, and things can go astray as well, where I remember one day we were asked to write a short story, and the way I got around with school was I had a manual typewriter, which was the bane of my existence because I weighed 5 kilos, one of those big heavy ones, and I'd drag it home every day and bring it back to school the next day. And we were asked to write a short story, 500-word short story. I went home, and it's one of those days when it's like when you're at home doing some work around the house, or you're on a job, and just things go really well. You don't even have to think about it. Just things fly so well. And I went home and wrote this particular short story, and I was so proud of my bit of homework, and I took it back the next day, and the teacher sort of, as the particular session went on in the classroom, each of us was invited to walk up and hand our homework in, and the teacher would sort of look at your particular short story and mark it off and be sent back to your desk. Anyway, it was my turn to take out my short story, and I was really happy with my work, and I thought, this is really cool. I was going to perhaps get an A. And walked up to the teacher and handed my piece of homework in, and she said, "Where is it?" And I said, "It's right there." And she said, "No, it's not." I said, "Yes." I just checked my school bag, and yes, it was the piece of paper I brought in for my homework. Well, what I'd actually done was the entire time I wrote the story, it was on correction ribbon. So it was on the white ribbon. So on the manual typewriter, you had the black, the blue, the red, and the white. So you could feel the typing on the page, but you couldn't see it. So do you think I could write the same story again? No chance in hell. But for me, it showed me that despite our best attempts, things can and do go astray. And that's where I talk about the facts of life where things do go astray. And I see a lot of people who get stressed out in offices or on the job. For example, I walk up to the kitchen, staff room kitchen, and they'll find their favourite coffee cup, and they'll go and wash it out, and then I'll go and boil the kettle, put the water in the kettle and boil the kettle, and they'll go to the fridge, and there's no milk. And for them, that's the biggest, I suppose, impact, because those smallest things can really impact upon their particular life. And for me, as an athlete and as an individual, those small differences, I think for me, have to make a big difference in knowing what I actually can achieve. And whether it be finding a particular guide runner or a small piece of, as I spoke about, Everest, my most valuable piece of equipment cost me $5, and that was a yak bell which I tied to one of my fellow climbers' backpacks. It saved their voice, it saved my voice, and provided consistent communication along that particular journey.
Gerrard, I mean, it's unbelievable. I'll chime in here. Dan's been stealing all the limelight. Yeah. But
Gerrard's been stealing the limelight.
Sorry, yeah, of course. But I mean, it's incredible to think that, how motivated you are as a person. When, the more I think about it, and we haven't really touched on it a great deal yet, but we spoke about it before, or you spoke about it before with our team, is that you're codependent basically with anyone to go and do. Like if you want to go for a run, you need to go with someone else, right?
Yeah. Every part of my life is teamwork. It always has and always will be. Whether it be having a guide dog or having my mates in primary school and high school and sort of, working together, would be sitting in the classroom and a person would tell me what was on the blackboard, of a mate, or, back in later years of high school, of, particular girlfriends, or, where it could be on the road or on a tandem bike, or even, for example, out there and doing an open water swim. I have a tether between myself and my guide swimmer. Obviously, thankfully today we have a whole range of technology. You've got your exercise bikes on the Swift or the Kickers, you've got a treadmill, but outside of that, sure. And even, it was really tough as a young guy in high school because, if you ask a girl out to go to the movies and they go, well, hang on, you're blind. What are you going to do at the movies? But I really did enjoy the movies. It wasn't about sort of going there and playing around in the dark. It was, sort of I can go to movies and enjoy. I can actually pick up at times, I love the suspense thrillers because at times I can tell by maybe the voice or the answers, who actually is the culprit, who's the particular bad person in a particular movie. Whereas if I went to a high action, movie like a Raiders of the Lost Ark. I might get. Now my wife obviously would give me some sort of feeling on some of the high action movies like the Die Hard movies, whereas outside of that, I go to movies all the time.
Are you a Die Hard fan?
Yeah.
Oh God, how good's Brucey?
I know, yeah.
He's a weapon. So you've obviously got a fantastic sense of humour, and you're actually a real cheeky bugger. Just based on a few
few things that have taken place in the last
stitched up one of our poor psychologists outside. But yeah, I mean, I gather you've probably used humour a lot in your life as part of a bit of a coping mechanism, a bit of a a bit of a light-hearted look on your situation. Do you agree?
I think for me it's about making people comfortable, because there is that fear of what do I say? Do I say have you seen a particular movie, or look at that particular moment. There's all those learned fears that people have about a person with a particular disability, and every single person has a disability. Whether you're being, as I said, not so good at spelling, not so good at maths, not being a chippy. Every single person has a particular disability, and it depends what time, what age you recognise that disability. Depends on your own personal success.
That's amazing. I'd be really interested to know, because I've heard various stories about different kids at school and their situations they're in, and the reasons why they may or may not be a victim of bullying. Did you ever experience any sort of bullying at school because of your situation, lugging not only carrying a seeing eye dog around the place, but also a typewriter? Yeah. Did you cop any grief at school?
Oh, look, I think there was the fear, but the way I overcame that was that, as I said, my very first day of primary school was the day I realised I was very different. Up until that stage, I thought it was quite normal to walk around the farm and every now and again bump into a half-open door or trip up a step. I thought that came with the traits of being a young kid.
I do that on the daily still now.
And it wasn't the very first day of primary school, the teacher had a very innovative thought about burning out nervous energy from the kids, and off we went down to the oval and asked to do 2 laps of the oval, and off I went running around the oval. I loved running at that stage, however, in that very first lap, I met every single goalpost on the oval. And it showed me that I was very different to the students, because obviously they could want to run around it. And I had to not only excel out there in the sports arena, but also in the classroom to break down their fears or their perception, not only amongst the students, but also amongst the staff, because for them, having a person who was totally blind within the classroom was, okay, what do I do? How do I teach them? And those, would it be humour, pursuits, or just giving it a go? For example, in my school's 400-metre race, I lined up my school's 400. I was pretty determined to go out hard, because that way I could hear the running of students behind me on the actual oval. And the gun went, so I went out, and about the 100-metre mark, I'd established about a 2 to 3 metre lead. I could hear the behind me of the students. Got around to the 200-metre mark, and same sort of lead. I could hear the puffing and panting of students behind me, and this is when I knew it was really important to dig deep. So I dug as deep as I could and went through the yelling of the crowd, and went through the finishing tunnel and across the line, and completed the fastest 400 Yeppoon High School had ever recorded. And I suppose quite arrogantly can say that time will never, ever be broken. And reason being is because at the 205-metre mark, I took a left-hand turn. I cut right across the middle of the oval, went through the trophy tent, and across the line, and completed 400 in approximately 42 seconds.
Well, they're never going to be able to take that away from you.
That's right.
Oh, Gerrard. So I just want to go back to sort of like early childhood, like even before school. So have you got brothers and sisters?
I have one brother who's fully sighted, and we had, I suppose, a great partnership. So I would follow the sound of his bike to school. I would ride to school behind him.
Is he older than you?
1 year younger.
1 year younger. Okay.
So we had the good old days when you would put a brake clip with
a
peg on your wheel and make a bit of a tick, tick.
Yeah.
And I could hear exactly where his bike was. Or I would follow we rode motorbikes in the paddocks, and I would follow the sound of his motorbike.
So how was it for your parents? I suppose you've probably discussed them what it was like, for them to have a child with no sight, and for them to be like, do we have to do anything differently to make sure that you were getting as many opportunities as you possibly could? Because obviously, like, no sight is a massive thing to be missing out on as a young child and as a human being. It's incredible.
There's two things there. I think for me, my parents were not about putting him in cotton wool. There was no compromises. It was get out there and give it a go, and let's see how far you get, and then we'll work it out from there. So whether it be, I used to play AFL by being a tagger, as a junior AFL, or I used to play cricket by just bowling and bowling and bowling, and I was just practice. I built my own cricket pitch at home. I would just practice bowling every day, so I could play local cricket. But I think for my being in rural and regional areas, there was no chance to be, I suppose, receive the services that may have been available in metropolitan cities. And that's perhaps what played me in good stead to really try and achieve what I have done today, because I know that, outside those circumstances, and look, people often ask me, listen, Gerrard, who's your hero? Who do you really look up to? Is it I've had dinner with Sir Edmund Hillary, and amazing guy, achieved so much in his lifetime as an adventurer. But who are the people who inspire me? Well, one of them lives in Brisbane. She's a girl who works for the state government. She's a double arm amputee. As I said to Dan, she could be a runner or just out there doing walking, but she's a swimmer. She swims on Sunday. She swam 5K in Noosa in the open water championships. And she just kicks. She goes to QUT. She swam 32 kilometres this week.
Oh my Lord! How does she?
Right.
How does she breathe? Because when you're breaststroke, when you're
That was
doing
my question.
yeah,
Yeah,
freestyle,
keep your torso
that's
bubble.
yeah.
That's right. She just does it.
Yeah, and you're right. And you're right. There's so many other sports that she could have tried her hand at, but she's probably chosen the most difficult one for her particular circumstance, and she's making it work.
That's right.
And have you found that especially as team sport, I suppose, or any sort of sport, I suppose you're always competing against someone else, but it's did you people were they not pity, but being oh, we can't try as hard, we want him to achieve better if we don't try as hard? Is that something that you're no, you go as hard as you possibly can because I'm going as hard as I possibly can, so I don't want anything, I want an even playing field. Is that the mindset?
It is a mindset, and that's why I've always competed. That's why I've always played, for example, sided cricket. I don't go and play blind cricket. I go and play with a real cricket ball. I go down to the nets. I can hear where the ball is by obviously the ball hitting the concrete or the actual pitch itself. And I can bowl. And as I said, I built my own cricket pitch and I practice. I put 3 big copper posts down the end and put black plastic, and I could actually feel or hear when the ball hit the stumps. Right now I do local fun runs and park runs, and I'm out there trying to beat as many as people I can. And I came second on Saturday, and I was devastated because I lost by 3 seconds. But that's how competitive I am.
Yeah, that's incredible. That is unbelievable.
It'd be good to go for net sesh sometime with you.
Yeah, bloody hope.
I'd be totally down for that.
But what drives you to because they're no easy feat, you know what I mean? To learn to play cricket completely blind, get your own cricket pitch and play sighted cricket. I mean, why choose to do it that way? Because obviously there are easier alternatives, you know what I mean? You could just go play blind cricket or not play cricket at all.
Yeah, I know. And that's where I'm a tad different, I suppose, in some respects, that I'm a blind person living inside a world. I'm not after, for example, I suppose this is an easy way of communicating, is that when I first built my house back in the late 90s, I didn't build the house, I designed the house. And the Courier Mail came and did a story because in my kitchen I put a skylight. And they said, why the hell is a blind guy putting a skylight in a house? And I said, well, I'm not building the house or designing the house for me. I'm designing it for the next person who buys it. That was my whole reason for putting a skull in there.
Yeah.
And I recognise I live in a sighted world, and I have to, obviously respect those environments. However, sure, if there can be some modifications, that would be, for example, accessible screen, or these days iPhones talk, or almost everything talks. That can assist me in doing what I do.
And also, bloody Courier Mail, is it not just enough for a blind guy to be fully on trend with the current latest, with the latest, is that not enough for you? Yeah.
Why putting a skylight in?
That's incredible.
I remember some years ago I was telling Dan on the way here when I was project managing the Vision Australia building on Old Cleveland Road there at Cooperoo. and I had to go to a meeting with GHD in the city. And I'll never, ever forget the situation. I was up on, I think they were like Waterfront Place or Riverside Centre. And I was in the foyer there, and I could never, ever forget when I heard the people coming for this particular meeting, and it was a marble floor. And I could hear them approach, and when they recognised that they were actually meeting with me, with a blind guy, you could hear the steps just hesitate, like, oh my God, they're going, we're dealing with a blind guy project managing a $10 million build. But they then still understood. But, I think outside the square, and, we built Queensland's first ever 5-star rated green building. It has 10,000 litre tanks in the floor and 100 solar panels. And as I was telling Dan, the louvers will open and close depending on the air conditioning, and if there's natural air outside, which is cool, we'll bring it in. We have blinds that will refract the light to save lighting costs inside the building. So we were a 5-star rated building.
And that was with Hutchies as well.
Yeah.
Good mates with Scott.
Yeah, cool. Oh, there you go. Yeah, we've had Scotty on the podcast. I had a beer with him at the cricket as well.
Yeah, while he was dressed like a convict.
Convict, that's right. But I'm just trying to, get a grasp. And I don't think anyone would ever fully understand exactly, what would go on inside your head in a way of. Like like that building that you built, you've got no idea what it looks like. I suppose you've got a feel of stuff that went into it, but you've got absolutely zero idea what that looks like.
Yeah, and that's the thing where you can develop a mental picture of it, and that's where...
Can you define that? Can you explain what that would look like what you think it would look like?
Oh, most definitely. Like there's, the way in which the building was sort of set up was, corridors which were very functional and very easy to navigate. There was no sort of tight, twisty turns, and the way I designed it was very open plan and very similar. I would describe it very much like getting around Melbourne, for example. Melbourne's very well laid out and it's blocks and easy to sort of navigate around. But that's the other, I suppose, frustrating thing is that, not frustrating, but people will think you want to know what things feel like, and they'll take you up. I've done a lot of travelling and as an athlete, and they'll take you to a castle and they'll say, put you on hand on the wall of a castle and go, this is what it feels like, this is what it looks like. Well, I think that your one hand now gives you an entire picture of what the castle looks like.
Something out of some comic book where it's just take the 3D image.
Sort of, but, and that's where obviously I've felt various designs or sculptures of Everest, so I have an idea what it actually looks like from a miniature perspective. But obviously it's the larger things outside your hand size we have and that's where I've got 2 kids, and that was a great thing about having them as young babies, know exactly what they feel like, whereas now as young adults I have no idea what they look like because
you don't get to hold them.
That's right.
Yeah, wow.
And I suppose within that as well though, you're very in tune with every other sense that you've got, and so I suppose that sort of comes into play to create a picture of any type of scenario for you as well.
Oh yeah, and look, and at times, when it rains, that creates a picture because it bounces off the, a sheet metal roof or off the bitumen or pavement or off grass or off trees, then that can create a magical picture for you in its own surroundings, or as does the wind, amongst the trees. It gives you some idea of the height of the trees and the way the actual tree is shaped by the wind that's rushing through the forest or a sparse net of trees.
I remember my mum, because she taught me long distance education. I grew up on properties around Longreach, and we were discussing there one day how or if, do they even do it? Explain colour to someone that's blind. Do they do that? And can it be done? Because I've got absolutely zero idea how you do that.
We were just talking about it outside.
I know, but I mean, Gerrard, do you actually... Yeah, have you been described what colour is?
Well, colour is as a feeling, as I was talking with Dan and the guys out there, as in people will assume that because you're blind you see black, which is furthest from the truth because I have prosthetics, whereas, to see dark you must first see light. So dark is the absence of light. So I would describe colours in various forms of feelings. So it could be, as I said outside, red could be hot, orange could be warm, blue could be white could be freezing. Whereas, red may be could be angry, could be love. Orange could be energetic, white could be fluffy, could be pure, could be freezing cold, a whole range of different feelings. And that's the same on a work site. We all could be looking exactly the same design or exactly the same sort of paint on a wall, but all seen in a very different light. Or the same instructions, the boss or the supervisor or the drafter may say, leave a set of instructions on what to do in that particular room, but we all see it, hey, listen, put the I put the PowerPoints in such a location. I took it in a very different way.
Yeah.
I wanted that particular PowerPoint put in a certain part of the building.
I suppose that speaks to perception, right? And everyone has different perceptions of the same thing.
Yeah, but I think people's perception is that, but still, like, on how you don't see darkness, right? So, because like everyone just assumes, it'd just be black. But what is it if it's nothing? Because is black's not nothing. Black is black.
But black is the absence of light. Nothing is what's between you and I. Okay, that's nothing. Now, for your brain to understand that is very difficult because you're always seeing something at the other end.
Yeah, that's the hard part because it's like there must be.
So if I hold my two hands, what in between my two hands is nothing. Okay, so that's very hard to conceive, but it's black, as I said before, is the absence of light. So that's first makes me see something.
Yeah, wow.
So what came? So I suppose the running came sort of first. That was like the predominant thing in your formative years that you sort of took to.
Oh, look, it was all range of sports. I would give everything a go, and I was banned from a few sports.
What sports?
What was I banned from?
Yeah,
hockey.
Because you kept flogging blokes in the shins.
No, they hit me. They raised their, and this is the typical attitude back then. It was like, I went how to go hockey. I could hear where the ball was going. I could hear the rattle of sticks, and I could run. And one young kid lifted their stick too high, hit me in the face, and got a bit of a cut. And the teacher said, "Oh well, it's too dangerous. We won't let you play hockey." So I thought, well, okay, I'll go and start doing other sports. And I started playing, as I said, AFL, cricket, soccer. Anything that was involving a ball, I suppose I played.
That's incredible.
I just can't. I'm speechless.
You must have in the cricket nets. You must have worn a few red balls or what?
My wife would go to work. She was a phys ed teacher with bruises all up and down her legs. Okay, from batting because I would get
you'd bowl at her.
Bowl, and she'd be like, I'd bounces or all sorts of stuff. There was no holding back with her. And even with my brother, I would bribe my brother to play cricket. So I would say, look, I would do your chores if you come outside and bat so I can bowl at you. That's how determined I was, I suppose, as a cricketer.
Yeah,
what sort of bowler are you?
Medium.
Medium pacer?
Yeah.
Yeah, righto.
I can get a bit of pace up with my height and
trundle them in.
Little off cutters.
Yeah. I like sort of angling them in, and because being a left armour.
You're a left armour?
Yeah.
Ooh, right up in the ribs.
Yeah.
Get that into you.
Yeah, a few of my neighbours and mates from school, a few black eyes, so lifting the ball. And I used to prepare the pitch so I had a bit of bounce in it. It's a bit ugly that way it was.
God, do you think Mitch Johnson's a weapon, Wait till you see Gerrard steaming in the nets.
Right.
You probably mates probably didn't want to go to the nets with you much anymore, do they?
They had an episode on You Can't Ask It on the ABC. I think it must have been end of last year. My wife and I were watching it. It was people that were blind, and it was incredible. One of the questions was, "Do you have enhanced senses?"
Sorry?
Same stuff as before. But is that a thing? You know what I mean? Like, do you think you hear better, or do you hear better than most people, or is this just a?
Okay, so our brain works on 75% of visual communication, visual use, and 30% obviously is on the hearing and another range of other senses we take into that 30% smell, touch, hearing. So people will then become dependent upon that particular visual, I suppose, sense of receiving information. And for me, obviously, not being able to see, I just intensify those other senses. So they're exactly the same. I'm given the same, I suppose, abilities. I just use them in a different way that you don't. So I suppose your hearing may become a bit lazy because, you can see what's... For example, it stuns me how people these days can go to a nightclub and actually communicate because it's all done by visuals. Because the music is that loud, they have no chance of hearing each other. So it would be... And I don't know how bartenders do it because they must absolutely go home and just sag on the couch because they've struggled to understand what drinks are being ordered.
Yeah.
I've definitely struggled to order drinks at a bar at nightclubs plenty of times. I don't know if it's because of the volume or if it's because I was slurring my words, but definitely had my challenges. You mentioned something before which I want to touch on, which seems really poignant, and it was that we all have disabilities. And I thought that was really interesting because I've never really considered it. But being in the mental health space for us, there are so many things that people experience, whether it's, poor body image or self-consciousness or a lack of confidence or all these kinds of things. And I suppose, is that what you're referring to when you say that we all have some sort of a disability?
Yeah, I think, look, would it be, and it's about recognising that particular disability, which is, I wouldn't say that it's a disability. It's a way we actually have to, something that we have to work with to improve upon ourselves. So, sure, I'm totally blind, but the way I work on that is, would it be through my sport or my career or my goals or my education or my training? All those ways I intend to improve upon myself, or having, for example, a guide dog that improves my ability to achieve what I'm looking to achieve. And it's the same, obviously, would it be that self-body image? It's okay, well, listen, how can I improve upon that? Would it be working on both my mental and physical well-being in improving that particular, I suppose, questionable disability as such? But we all can look at some amazing obstacles in our lives and see them as obstacles, whereas there are some amazing gaps. And what I mean by that is that I had a friend who was lecturing in sports in the United States, and for the first long weekend, he bought himself a mountain bike and joined a local club and went out there with the club. And first time at it, it wasn't too crash hot at it. And after the first few hours, he had a few falls, and they stopped for a short break at lunchtime. And one of the more experienced mountain bikers came up to Tom and said, Tom, well, how are you finding it? And Tom said, well, obviously it's a bit challenging, but perhaps by the end of the long weekend, I'll get the hang of it. And the more experienced mountain biker said, well, listen, you've had a few falls. When you're going down the mountains, what are you looking at? And Tom said, well, obviously I'm looking at the rocks and the trees. And the more experienced mountain biker said, well, that's your biggest mistake. And Tom said, what do you mean? And the more experienced mountain biker said, well, you should be looking at the gaps in between the rocks and the trees. And often what is evident is the rocks and the trees. We don't look at the gaps. And the gaps are what we actually can achieve. And sure, I can't drive a car, but I can certainly catch a taxi or I can catch public transport. And they're the gaps.
Wow, that's an awesome perspective, isn't it?
Mind blown.
Very cool.
That's cool.
But you had a guide dog that could drive a car, didn't you?
I did. Back in '89, we placed a front page article on the front page of the Rocky Bulletin, blindness no blink on licence. Gerrard Gosens and guide dog Joey receive driver's licence. Joey does 2 barks for left, a bark for right, and he opts for stop. And sadly, 65% of people who read that story believed it. And we had phone calls all day to the police station and to the newspaper asking how a dog does reverse angle parking. But we've done crazy. Like as you heard, Dan, I've flown a plane around Queensland 3 times, scared the hell out of the air traffic controllers. But we got
on your own.
I had a co-pilot, and they would give me some of the instrumental information, whether it be the speed. And it was because it was a motor glide. It had a 15-metre wingspan, so I could actually tell by the actual feel of the wings in which way. Obviously was level. I could use things like, for example, like the sun from our directional perspective, but they would give me some of the altitude readings, and it wasn't. There's not a lot to run into up there at 5,000 feet or 10,000 feet, so it's very capable for a person who's totally blind to do.
And you must really be relying on your, what do you call it, like the feeling, like your center of of gravity to sort of feel your how level you are and all that sort of stuff.
But what do you think? You've achieved a lot. What do you think your greatest achievement is thus far?
Probably being on this podcast, I would say.
Apart from that.
Funny enough, it was Dancing with the Stars. And reason being is because climbing Everest, Everest isn't the most technical mountain in the world. Whilst it's the highest, there are far much harder mountains in the world to climb. Whereas Dancing with the Stars, it's something that I'd never ever done before in my life. I never danced a step. And going on live television, so there's no sort of, let's stop now, let's cut, let's come back and do that again. It's live television. Secondly, is it's a live band because it takes away your hearing, so you're doubly impacted by the whole process. Then you've got 3 cameras that follow you around the floor. Then you've got a live audience. Then you've got lights that ring around the circumference of the actual dance floor. So there was all these particular challenges that we had to face, but we made it to the final of Dancing with the Stars. And that was about the journey. It wasn't about how good we were as a dance team. It was about the story we told and about the effort we made into inventing. So we invented a whole range of different lifts and throws. And that's what captured the imagination of the Australian public, was the different lifts. Like, there are people now still using our lifts in dance choreography.
Oh, are they named after you?
No,
Please tell me.
not named after us. But they saw, okay, well, listen, okay, that's what they did, and they've now used our lifts. So it's we had to be, I suppose, innovative in the way we actually told the story on a particular dance, because, for example, I think there was the fourth, as outside, the fourth episode was the hardest, where we had to dance for 20 seconds on your own. Now, 20 seconds may not sound like a long time, but 20 seconds on national television, dancing entirely independently, having no idea where you are on the dance floor, even if you are facing the right way. I could have been spinning around and dancing the entirely incorrect way. I could have danced this way into the actual audience, gone left of centre, off we go, and off I went. So, yeah, look, that 20 seconds was the longest, I suppose, time I've ever spent in my own psychology of knowing that, making sure that I was in the right place at the right time.
There's a couple of real chances that are being taken here, because number one, Channel 7 to have the audacity to invite a blind guy onto their TV show, as a dancer. Obviously, what are they thinking, right?
That's right.
And obviously they want you to succeed. And then for yourself to take up the chance and go and do it. And obviously you want to succeed as well. You don't want to fail on national TV. But how important do you think it is to take chances like that and put yourself in uncomfortable situations that may set you up for failure?
Oh, look, as a blind athlete, when I go out there and I've raced, whether it be on the athletics oval or any, I suppose, number of sports, like I know that I'm not going to be able to achieve as much as a sighted person can, whether it be, for example, playing AFL. I can't go out there and mark the ball or do a specky, whatever it may be, or for me, it was about understanding, okay, well, these are my opportunities and how best can I achieve at those. And on Dancing with the Stars, sure, I wasn't the most, I suppose, finesseful person on the dance floor, but I tell you what, we told the story, and we actually also made it exciting for people with the different lifts. Like when you've got a person running at you and you have to catch them and throw them through your legs and then back through the other side, like that was something that was innovative and creative and created a story. Whereas I could have been very, I suppose, graceful, but that was going to tell a story.
And it must have been sort of almost exhilarating for your dance partner to entrust you with her safety, I suppose, in doing all that sort of stuff. And that must really empower you as well, to know that person's willing to put their trust in your hands.
Oh, look, we were working our asses off the entire time, like, in between because every Sunday we have to do the live show, and in between that week where we're learning 3, 4, 5 dances in that 1 week, we were working so hard on making. And as I said before, with that yak bell on climbing Everest, my most valuable piece of equipment on Dancing with Stars, again, maybe a bit more than $5, maybe $8. And what was that? That was carrot and ginger juice. And the reason why I use that was because ginger juice is great for seasickness. And with the number of spins that I was doing on Dancing with the Stars, sighted people or professional dancers will look at a point on the floor because of the equilibrium.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so for me, not having that, I thought, okay, well, what stops seasickness? Ginger does. So I would down a couple big glasses of carrot juice and ginger juice before the actual show. That way I wasn't going to get sort of, lost in my spins. Yeah.
I suppose it would have been empowering too for, kids at home that were blind, that were listening to the TV. It's like there's someone that I've been listening to this station, or I've been listening to TV for so long, and I've never ever heard of anyone being blind on TV. That would have been empowering too.
But you know what the worst thing was that the actual number of angry fathers who, the reason being is because the wives were home going, well, if a blind can dance, why can't you dance? So they were getting sort of japed and rizzed by their wives going, well, hey, listen, if he can do it, then why aren't you up on the dance floor as well?
So have you continued to dance?
Yeah. So Jess and I do some corporate events still together. So after all these years, we still dance together at various.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yeah, and again, going back to the various conditions, and this would be the same within, I suppose, the building environment. We all can be trying to do the same process in our work, but there's different environments can create a whole range of different circumstances. As in, if you go to a wooden sprung floor to an actual wooden floor, they can alter the speed of the actual dance. because it's the rebound off their wooden floor or how slippery it is. So that can change a whole range of different situations.
And for someone who can't see that,
just take it
distinctly,
out.
dramatically changes your responsiveness, I suppose.
What about your like? What are you aspiring to achieve? In the future, Gerrard. Like you've obviously achieved a shitload of stuff already.
I mean, a
A
little
few
bit.
things.
Yeah, couple.
So what's the next thing? Because like I'm just blown away with like how motivated you are and how willing you are to try new things, because it's a rare trait these days. Like there's so many people that, when we've talked about this, endless on this podcast, that, people have got a business idea, or they want to quit their job and travel around the country, or they want to, go and do something outlandish, but it's sort of, they want to conform. They don't want to take big risks because they're worried about what people perceive them if they fail. It doesn't seem like you give three shades of anything about that. You're just out doing exactly what you want.
Because I don't have those learned fears. And that's because, as I said with Dan's team, is that, we have three fears which are fundamental to our lives as human beings. And that's the fear of falling, which makes us walk. So if we wouldn't have the fear of falling, when we got off our hands and knees, we wouldn't have that fear of falling, we actually wouldn't learn how to walk as human beings. The second one is the fear of noise, which is a sense of danger. So it could be, earthquake, fire, whole range of storms. That's the fear of noise. The third one is the fear of isolation, which brings us together as communities. So we wouldn't be breeding as human beings and wouldn't have, obviously, our various communities right around the world. Every other fear is learned. So when Mum says, don't touch a hot plate, you might burn yourself. That fear of heat is then learnt. Mum says, don't touch the knives, you might cut yourself. That fear of knives is then learnt. When little Johnny, your brother, says, don't do that, you might fall, or fail, or whatever it may be, that fear of failure is then learnt. We have the fear of success. We have the fear of the unknown. There's all these learned fears throughout life which we learn. And for me, as a person who's totally blind, I hadn't learned those fears. It's like, for example, when you go climbing Everest, I don't have that fear of falling because I haven't seen how far I actually am falling.
Of course.
Can we have a little yarn about the Paralympics and
Sure.
your escapades there? Because actually, I'm surprised that you actually haven't just competed in the in the regular able-bodied Olympics. I suppose it's because you need a guide. But do you reckon you'd be able to cut it with the big guns out there?
Those guys are phenomenal, and I think for me, there's a whole range of things that impact upon whether it be from a training, from a like I've never seen. And this is actually, I've spoken to my coaches and other people about this, is I've never seen a person run. So I didn't even know if I'm running right. It took me obviously through a number of drills and skills to actually make sure that I'm actually running efficiently. But as I suppose running a 5,000 or a 10,000 or a 1,500 requires that technique and I suppose number of drills to make sure you actually are running efficiently, quickly on an actual track. But yeah, sure, look, I've done it with some of the best, and I still compete now amongst, I'll be up there. But as an athlete, as a totally blind athlete, for me now, moving from athletics onto triathlon is a whole new different environment because you're going from a runner, we're now to, and runners normally hate swimming because that's a boring sport, up and down, up and down, up and down, and now to cycling and to run. So it's a whole combination of different disciplines that you have to learn very quickly, and I'll go on to hopefully, this year, Tokyo 2021, if it goes ahead. And I'll go to the Commonwealth Games, and once I've done there, I'll actually hang up the boots and retire as a international athlete. But sure, I'll still go on and do Noosa tries and Mooloolaba tries and any number of other events. But I have some other passions, like I love jet skis. I love to, if someone said to me, would you like to jet ski around the world, I'd jump at it. Absolutely.
You should come with me and Ed. We're talking about jet skiing around Australia for charity.
Yeah.
Well, we should get you along.
Yeah.
God, it'd be...
The funniest moment I ever had on jet ski was at we had Schoolies Week, and I had my girlfriend went across to Great Keppel Island, and because I'd ridden motorbikes, and riding a motorbike on sand is exactly like doing a jet ski. And so the faster you go, the higher you are in the water, easier it is to move around. And I went over there and I said to my girlfriend at the time, I said, listen, let's get a jet ski. Okay, this is great. I said, look, you just go out there and I'll follow you. And these are the old days when the jet skis used to have the motors underneath the seat. So she gets on the jet ski and I say, okay, look, you go out and I'll follow you. So she starts going through the waves and starts putting a bit of power in it. Now, as I said, the actual engine's under the seat. So as we go faster, louder and louder it becomes. So it got to a point where my engine's so loud, I actually can't hear her engine. So, unbeknownst to me, I've actually gone screaming past her
Oh no.
in between yachts out to the break, and had to send out a rubber ducky to stop me because I was heading to Tasmania, I think, by the end. But these days, obviously, the jet skis are much more responsive and the engine's a lot quieter, so it's very easy. But Sudoku, Kawasaki, Yamaha, get me on any one of those.
So when was your first Paralympics?
1996, Atlanta Paralympic Games, and from there, Sydney 2000 and Beijing 2008.
What was Sydney 2000 like?
That's what I want to know too.
Sydney 2000 was spectacular.
The best Olympics that's ever been.
Most definitely.
Bar none.
Yeah, and for me, as working behind the scenes, as executive officer and also as an athlete, I made a fundamental mistake as an athlete there. I came into the village. I put so much energy and work into making sure, obviously, the Australian team and what we were doing was right. And I went in there absolutely exhausted. I was ranked number 2 for the 5,000, and the gun went, and I just it's like the old days of get smart and Jaime when Jaime loses power and just win. Whereas in the 10,000 and the marathon were much better efforts. In the marathon, I led the marathon until the 25k mark, and to run across the Sydney Harbour Bridge to be leading the marathon, the entire Australian crowd there was just phenomenal. And to walk into, as I said, Dan, there you don't walk into nothing ceremony. In actual fact, you float. You're picked up by the sheer splendour of 87,500 people, and you float that entire lap.
That's incredible. I mean, because coming from Sydney originally, don't hold it against me, but that Sydney 2000 Olympics, the blue line that they had marked on the roads for the marathon runners, and obviously the marathon went far and wide out past Homebush, but that blue line was on the road for years after those Olympics. And any time I drive around and there'd be places where you'd catch a glimpse of that blue line, and it just, I don't know, I just always got the best feeling seeing it. It just brought back all those memories of the Olympics and just how sort of special that was. And yeah, that was one that really stuck in my mind.
It's still here in Brisbane too as well, the blue line. Do you know the blue line's still here for the Commonwealth Games?
No.
Yeah, that's still, so if you walk around the University of Queensland, the blue line is still there from when Deke won the Commonwealth Games marathon.
Yeah, wow. So what sort of success have you had in Paralympics? Have you podiumed? Have you got any?
I've got 2 5ths and a 7th.
Yeah, nice.
And that was at the Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games, and we bronzed in Atlanta and Beijing 4th.
Oh, wow. See a little bronze medal there hanging up from Atlanta.
But I've competed in 14 different world championships, and I had medals from 14 different world champs.
Wow, that's incredible. Just on Paralympics, I imagine, there's a lot of, so obviously you're born blind, but there's a lot of people who sustain injuries throughout their career or throughout their lives for any number of reasons, and then they go on to become Paralympians. And I would assume that a lot of these people may never have had aspirations of becoming an Olympic athlete, but have been dealt a blow.
Yep.
But it's opened the door to achieve really great success, opportunity, and drive through Paralympics. Do you see this a lot, and how important do you think that is for a lot of those individuals?
Oh, look, it's been amazing. You look at one of our senior canoeists. He was in Afghanistan. Obviously, was injured by a ULB. Whereas you've got people who would be accidents in mines or workplace injuries where they've lost an arm or a leg, who have now become paraplegic in wheelchairs. It could even be as simple as a deck collapsing and losing a leg. So this whole range of different stories from athletes, and that's where the Paralympics began. The actual Paralympics began from the end of the Second World War. It was those guys that came back from the Second World War who lost a leg and they were placed into hospital. And in Stoke Mandeville in London, one hospital challenged another hospital, and that's where the Paralympics began.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, wow.
So that's where the attachment, or that's where the connection is with the veterans is between that and the Paralympic Games.
Do you ever think that do you imagine life, if you were born fully sight, with full sight?
Mm-hmm.
Do you imagine what that would look like?
Oh yeah.
What does that look like to you? Because and do you achieve the same things that you've achieved in the life that you've created?
I think I would. I would be obviously more entrenched in sport. Would it be trying to play cricket for Australia, or AFL, and those would be the big passions, and all the other sports I'll be trying to compete in.
That's incredible.
Where's the love of AFL come from? Because you're from Yeppoon. You'd think
You haven't mentioned a cyclone once.
Yeah, if I was, well, I don't know, I'm just guessing here, but if I was blind living in Yeppoon, I think rugby league would be an easier sport to get into if I wanted some contact, like ball sport stuff, because you just pick it up and run straight ahead.
AFL is actually very big in Yeppoon, and the Swans actually hold the national record for the most continuous wins.
Oh, really?
In Australia. The Swans Yeppoon team, I think, is now, look up the records. They actually now hold the world record in Australia for a number of wins by a team.
Yeah, okay. Incredible. So that's obviously that's where the love of it came from the Yeppoon side.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And then, I mean, so when you were playing AFL...
I was a tagger.
Okay,
so I would actually, if my coach said to me, okay, look, this is little Johnny, he's pretty good. We want you to keep him out of the game.
Yeah, you just stay on him.
I stay on him. I could run, and I would almost attach myself to him, and anytime the ball came anywhere near it, I would block him out.
Or tackle him.
Yeah, hip and shoulder, I'll be good.
How good's that? Yeah, wow. And what about the Australian cricket team? Like, are you a test match man, one dayer, 2020?
Yeah, all of them.
You love them all?
I don't know about that 2020 game last night.
A 2020 game last night.
I lost by 53, right?
Yeah, and Finchie's not in good form. Not at all.
Did he get picked, did he?
Yeah, he's a captain.
Oh, I didn't even think he would have got picked. He had the worst Big Bash.
I know.
He had an average of about 7.
Well, he didn't jag an IPL team, so.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So there's one whole piece of this puzzle that is just, I don't know, kind of the most incredible part to me, is that you are an expert chocolatier.
How the hell did that start?
Yeah, I know. Like,
what is it? Because you love chocolate? Because you don't look like you love chocolate. I mean, you've got about a 6% body fat composition
every day. Every day.
And you're not sick of it yet?
No, never.
Don't say that.
Absolutely never. Because like I eat real chocolate. I eat that sort of when people walk down. I suppose you can call it the confectionery aisle, but I call it the nuclear waste aisle. If you walk into and pick up a Cadbury or Nestle or Hague's, whatever, the second ingredients is always going to be vegetable fat because that's how they make their chocolate look shiny. It's compound chocolate, whereas I use Kovac chocolate. It's real chocolate. It goes through what we call a tempering process. It doesn't mean chocolate has a temper. In actual fact, it's very happy. But we're always, and Lover's chocolate came through playing sports, so it was very difficult to pick up a memento or a statue or whatever it is to bring back as a gift. Chocolate was always an easy go-to thing, great reward at the end of a competition, great way to get through customs. You declare chocolate, walk through the particular sort of declaration aisle of food items, and developed an awareness and taste, and opportunity came up, and 12 years later, here we are as chocolatiers, having 2 stores in the Brisbane CBD and designing different desserts. And I make, for example, Father's Day I make beer chocolates. I use 6 different Australian beers, called the Ultimate 6-Pack.
What beers?
I change it around all the time. So I always, because there are so many different Australian beers, I've used everything from Growling Dog, Steamy Mountain Goat, Wicked Elf, I always try and use different beers from around Australia.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you say an opportunity came up, but like how do you
what
actually get into chocolate?
Well, someone was selling a store, and I thought, okay, well, here's a great chance to take on chocolate, and off we went. And as in this last year, we became obviously making hot chocolates and coffee, so I've sort of delved into that the last sort of 12 months. And if you had to ask me as a young kid, I'd be a chocolatier in a cafe, and I would have gone, no chance in hell. I've never had a bucket list. I've never had a bucket list of Dancing the Stars or climbing Everest or running from Cairns to Brisbane. It hasn't been that sort of predetermined bucket list. It's always been about the opportunity, and that's what scares the hell out of my wife. Is because, as I said, if you guys said to me, want to jet ski around Australia? I'd say yes, and she'd go, no.
We have been spitballing this idea. It's still here.
Yeah. And like, with a triathlon, when I was swimming in the pool at Yeronga swimming pool, one of the guys said, oh, listen, you're Gerrard Gosens. And I said, yeah. He said, hey, listen, you ever done a triathlon? I said, no, mate, never done a triathlon, because I hated swimming. It's such a boring sport. And I said, oh, look, I'll give it a go. And this was 5 years ago. Well, here I am now in the Australian team and looking to compete for Australia Tokyo 2021.
That's incredible. Oh, gee, I hope Tokyo goes ahead.
And look, if it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's been about the journey. Like, I know I've given it everything I had, and if it does, and for me, it's been about that journey as it was with the Sydney to Westfield run.
Well, I mean, but it's just Japan's just such an awesome place. Have you been? Japan's just such an awesome place. It would just be an incredible place to host an Olympics. I'm sure they would end up be so clean. They'd put on such a tight
All
show.
the fresh salmon avocado rolls you could dream of.
I actually did a marathon there.
Get in me.
I did a marathon there some years ago, and I was racing it pretty hard, and I was stunned because the Japanese would go along, and along the drink tables they had green tea and chocolate cake. That's all they had for the athletes.
That wouldn't work too well together, would it?
No, it didn't. So there was a lot of
Green tea and chocolate.
I know. I didn't do it, but they were into it. That was their big time recovery for a green tea and chocolate cake on the actual marathon course.
Gerrard, do you find that? I mean, we were chatting a little bit in the car earlier, but you must just be such an awesome role model and mentor for other vision impaired individuals to look up to, and especially young kids.
Yeah, look, I have. I work with a lot of kids, and my actual company is named after a young kid I was working with. So Chocolate Moments is the trading name, but my company is actually called Stop and Smell the Roses. And the reason why it's called Stop and Smell the Roses is I was working with a young kid called Blake, and Blake unfortunately was diagnosed with leukemia at the age of 11. And he went through a whole range of various things, lung infections, and had through the chemotherapy, he actually became totally blind. And I went and worked with him and his mother at the Mater Hospital, and he came into remission and went to Centenary High School. Things were looking pretty good. The age of 13, he got himself a girlfriend. Things were looking really cool. I went away to the 2006 Athletics World Championships in Netherlands, and came back, and unfortunately Blake came out of remission. He passed away at the age of 14, and I went to Blake's funeral. One of the hardest things, obviously, to go to a funeral, but to go to a young kid's funeral is even harder. And I came away from the funeral, and a few people said to me, "Oh, listen, Gerrard, it must have been pretty tough." And all the things, just done Everest and Athens, the Athletics World Championships. I said, yeah, look, it made you appreciate how you have to stop and smell the roses. And that brought about an idea. And I went back to the office, and I called up a law firm which was still open on the Gold Coast. It was just after 5, and thankfully they answered the phone. And they looked after intellectual property. And I proposed this idea to the guy. I said, listen, there's a day for Valentine's Day when people, for romantics, they can celebrate. But there's nothing for people as such. So, for example, if I walked up to a person 10 years ago and I said to them, how are you? They'd probably say, oh, I'm really good, thanks. If I walk up to them today, it's, I'm really busy. I'm really, really busy. And they judge their self-worth by how actually busy they actually are. So my proposal, and I'm still there to do it once I retire from sport, is I've trademarked the words stop and smell the roses. So I actually own those words around the world. And what I'm going to do is set up a day where if I have a day which allows people to, I suppose, go and have a cup of coffee with their brother, or go and go with the teammates and have a dinner, or go to the movies, or really recognise someone for their support or their help. Or it could be mum, dad and the kids going and having a picnic. And on Stop and Smell the Roses Day, I'll produce a different coloured rose because every rose has a different meaning. I'll also sell a pair of rose-coloured glasses, and because people can see things through a different light, and that'll be like a foundation of Stop and Smell the Roses and support Australian charities.
That's incredible.
Awesome.
That's a really Ed would have been a big fan of that because he's always talking about how people are always talking about how they're so busy, and it really irritates him.
It drives me mad. No one's not busy.
I know. And for me, it was about, taking that time out to actually say, hey, thank you, and that's, you're doing a great job. Because, today if I walked up to a person in the office and I gave them a bunch of flowers, they go, what's going on there? A bit of sexual harassment there. Whereas if I walk up and Stop and Smell the Roses Day and I give, Jenny or whoever it is a particular rose for Stop and Smell the Roses Day, and that also comes with a voucher to go and get your hair done. Well, that's something that I'm saying, hey, listen, thank you for your support.
Oh, yeah. That's incredible, mate.
Well, mate, keep us up to date with that because love to assist anyway. We've been through setting up the non-profit thing, and it is it's a journey. It's a journey.
It's a journey for sure, mate. It's been an absolute privilege to have you in here today, and it's such a great yarn, and you're an awesome speaker and have just got such a wealth of experience. So thank you so much. I would just ask you to share one final story with us, please. And Ed hasn't heard this, but I managed to hear it the other night. Just that time you called a lift.
Oh, yeah, okay.
A dog, had your boss in the lift, was it?
Yep. So there's sort of two stories attached to that. Is that whilst Rockhampton and Central Queensland had stories with April Fool's Day, as I said, perceptions still amaze me what can or can't be achieved. And when you walk into a lift, you can very quickly pick up if another person's in the lift there with you, whether because of the packet of hot chips they're carrying, or their briefcase, or perfume, or aftershave. And I walked into a lift one day and had a rather large box on my arm and a dog on the left hand. Hands were somewhat full. And I sensed the person was in the lift there with me. So I said very calmly, very nicely, would you mind pressing ground, please? There's no movement towards the button. So I said it a bit louder. I said, excuse me, would you mind just pressing ground? Again, no movement. So I thought, I'm stuck. I'll go and press myself, So I struggled forward with the box on my arm, and just as I went to hit the button, this voice came, said, oh, it's all right, mate. I pressed it for you. I said, oh, sorry, mate. I thought you didn't hear me. He said, no, it's all right. I thought you were talking to the dog.
You are joking.
No.
Oh, man.
I have it, probably the entertaining experiences are, though, is that two of them is when you walk down the road, often you stop by people in the street who assume that because you're blind, either A, you're a dog psychologist, or I suppose a veterinarian. And I was walking down towards the Queen Street Mall about 8ish in the morning, and this young girl stopped me. She said, excuse me. I said, look, I appreciate you can't see. I said, thank you very much. And she said, look, I was wondering if you'd like to have a feel of me. So I did. She was a very young, attractive model, had just done her hair, bought brand new clothes. Here was this guy walking past, not looking at it, so she thought she'd better do something about it. So now I guess most mornings I walk down Queen Street.
Oh, wow.
But I have had, you guys have been to the Regatta Hotel?
Oh, yeah, plenty of times.
So when Miss Regatta was on?
No.
Okay, I used to have Miss Regatta at the Regatta Hotel.
Yeah, right.
I was one of the judges.
That's cruel.
Well, no, it was a benefit. Because I got to judge the swimwear, the sportswear, and the formal wear.
Oh, wow.
And they told them that a blind guy was doing it. So every year I apply to be a judge.
And suddenly rubbing your hand against the castle wall to imagine
That's
the
right.
castle isn't
That's
so far-fetched, is it, mate?
That's right.
Oh, Gerrard, that was that was incredible yarn. It's the first time that I've ever had an in-depth conversation with someone that's fully blind. I think it's probably one of the first times many listeners have heard, from a blind person on a podcast. So we really appreciate your time, mate. Yeah, you're a ball of energy. It's hilarious to yarn to you, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. Look forward to sort of growing this friendship into the future.
And obviously wishing you the best of luck with hopefully Tokyo going ahead. I know you're training quite hard for that at the moment. So yeah, we certainly are right behind you here. So hopefully we can get out there and show them how it's done.
Thanks, Dan.
Awesome.
Good
Thanks,
on
mate.
you, Gerrard.
Oh, shit.
If I stop, I'll die.